Nani vai embora, vai fugir Nani, para com os olhos do adversário. Parou, Nani, vê que tem Almeida, vê que tem João Pereira, fugiu João Pereira, vai cruzar, cruzamento, Ronaldo, gol!
Welcome to the inaugural PortuGOAL podcast. This is brought to you by www.portugal.net, which is the internet's foremost site about Portuguese football written in the English language. This is a completely new format. I hope you like it. Apologies for any technical glitches. This is the first time we're doing it. Tell us at the end what you think, how it can be improved, and if you like it. So, first of all, let me introduce today's guests. We have, forget Jose Mourinho, forget Jorge Jesus, forget Andre Villas-Boas. We've got our own tactical guru, Vasco Mota Pereira. Hi there, Vasco. How are you doing?
Hi, Tom. I'm fine, thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay, good to have you as well. Also, speaking all the way from Canada, we have Victor Ferreira. He's such a big Porto fan that he even changed his surname to match the surname of one of Porto's most successful coaches. Hi there, Victor. How are you doing?
Great, Tom. Glad to be here, of course.
Okay, good stuff. And zooming back over the Atlantic, back to Portugal, it's Stephen Gillett, who's mostly found nowadays in the press box at the AXA Stadium, fast becoming a bit of a Braga expert. Hi there, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Tom. Yeah. Hello, all the PortuGOAL viewers and readers.
And talking about PortuGOAL viewers and readers, one name you'll definitely recognise is Nathan Motz. He's our Seleção expert, follows them all over the place, traipsing around Ukraine all this summer. Nathan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Okay. And last but not least, Orlando Machado. Now, visitors to the site, PortuGOAL.net, would definitely recognise that name. He's a prolific commenter, doesn't hold back on his words at all, doesn't pull any punches, and we just had to invite him for our inaugural vodcast. How are you doing, Orlando?
I'm great.
Okay. That's it. And myself, it's Tom Cunda. I'm the creator of PortuGOAL.net and managed to get a good team together, which basically the thing which binds us all together is a passion about Portuguese football, Portuguese clubs, Portuguese players, and also Portuguese players playing abroad. We try and cover it all on the site. So let's get cracking. Today's show is going to be all about Portugal's club sides in Europe. It came to an end, the group stage of both the Champions League and the Europa League this week. First of all, Vasco, Jorge Jesus, the Benfica coach, has said throughout this campaign that he thought that Benfica were the second best team in their group, and he may have a point, but the fact of the matter is they're out of the Champions League. Where did it all go wrong for Benfica?
Well, Tom, to be honest, I thought that the time for moral victories was long gone in Portugal. We were used to it 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I didn't think it would exist anymore. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, if you think you're the second best team. If you get third or fourth, I think the table usually does not lie. I'm a huge fan of Jorge Jesus' work at Benfica. I really am. I really appreciate his teams and the way he can transform regular players into stars. But I think, as is often the case with very good managers, he's a bit stubborn, to say the least. And his insistence on playing just two players in central midfield is usually his downfall. Benfica should have gotten through this particular group. It was rather accessible, to be honest. But Benfica keep getting punished by getting just steamrolled through the middle, even from teams as Celtic or Spartak Moscow, who should be well within the reach of Benfica. That's my opinion.
Okay, just picking up on that. Of course, after they drew 0-0 at Barcelona, where I think most people agree they played well, but of course paid for all those missed chances. Even though it wasn't a top Barcelona side, they certainly gave a good account of themselves, Benfica. Picking up on what you just said there, do you think the slight weakness in midfield, especially since the departures of Xavi Garcia and Axel Witsel, of course, do you think this will cost them also in the Europa League, or do you think that they've got a chance of going very far, maybe to the final of the Europa League, or even winning it, as Jorge Jesus himself suggested in the post-match press conference at the Camp Nou?
Yeah, certainly. I think Benfica will shine in the Europa League. Yes, I think they will be a huge threat to every other team, especially because English teams usually tend to overlook the Europa League. They don't care as much since it's not the Champions League. So I think that this frailty that Benfica has will be a lot less clear in the Europa League because the teams are not as strong and not as able to punish you for little mistakes. So I think Benfica will definitely shine in the Europa League, yes.
Okay. Orlando, I think we'll move on to you now because we just mentioned his name a few times there, Jorge Jesus. Somebody who divides opinion quite strongly, and I think it's fair to say that you haven't held back at all on your criticisms about him. What is it exactly that you have against Jorge Jesus?
I'm not actually against JJ. That's a misconception. I go game to game. My main issues with JJ are his big game record, his player selections, even his tactics. For example, in big games, he has a 46% winning percentage. Against Porto in the Liga, he's 1-4-2. That's a 14% win percentage. In the Champions League, he's only got a 38 win percentage. None of those records are good, right? Now, if he starts to win big games, then I'll be the first on his bandwagon cheering him on. I was born in an era where Benfica was dominating, so I probably have more in common with Porto fans than I do with Benfica fans currently. I don't like to see Portuguese teams lose, and especially not Benfica.
Okay, Orlando, very forcefully put, as usual. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the other team who played on Wednesday night. That's Braga, who they, of course, went down 2-1 against Galatasaray, ended up finishing bottom of their group, a massive 7 points behind the third place team. Really very disappointing campaign. But it was Stephen who was there at the AXA Stadium. I have to ask you, Stephen, it was a bit of a case of deja vu, wasn't it? They played well, they went ahead, and they couldn't keep the lead again. Were they really 7 points worse than Cluj and Galatasaray?
Yeah, it really was a bit of deja vu, to be honest. I was there for the United game, which they were very in control of that game. Well, they were very in that game for an hour, and eventually it fizzled out. And exactly the same happened midweek. I think in terms of them being 7 adrift, I think it's a bit harsh, and I don't really think it tells the full story of their European campaign. I think they lost obviously early on to Cluj, which was a really bad result. But then if you look, I think the heart of their campaign was the 2 games against Manchester United, home and away. And in both games, I thought they played well. They caused United quite a lot of problems, Eder particularly up front. But when the pressure was on, Braga just seemed to crumble a little bit. The big example for me when I was at the game against United was Beto's Frango, when he just legged it out of goal with Van Persie in a not particularly dangerous area, and just made it easy for a world-class player. So yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot every now and then. They then had a massive game against Cluj in the return game, and I don't really think it's too much of them kind of doing that much wrong. They just had a shocker. They just had a really bad game. The Portuguese guy, Rui Pedro for Cluj, he had the game of his life, scored a hat-trick. De Glau stupidly got sent off. And I think you just can't afford to do those sorts of things at Champions League level. So although they had, I think at times they played really well. And I think some of their players have kind of, their reputations have been enhanced during the Champions League campaign. But at the end of the day, 3 points on the board at the end of a good campaign, it obviously can't be that good. The table doesn't lie. But I don't think, going back to your question, I think 7 points adrift at the bottom of the table is a little bit harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think too many people can argue with that, really. Nathan, Stephen just mentioned there Eder, and he really did shine in this Champions League campaign, especially the games against Manchester United. Who could forget that fantastic piece of skill he did for Alan's second goal? My question to you, as the Seleção expert, is: have Portugal finally found a real top-class striker who could become a world-class striker? And if so, how much of a difference would that make to the Portuguese national team?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways we can look at this. We can talk about it. Ask the question. Is he going to be the next world beater for Portugal? Is he going to be the next Eusebio or something like that? And I honestly, I really don't think he's that kind of player. But I think when we ask the question and frame it like this, is he the kind of player that Paulo Bento can use to accomplish his objectives for the team? I certainly think Eder is that player. We look at two of the main strikers Portugal have used over the last couple of years. That's Hugo Almeida and Helder Postiga. They have some contrasting qualities that I think Eder kind of embodies a little bit of both. When we look at Almeida, he's big and strong. He's physical. He gets himself into scoring positions, but he's a terrible finisher. Let's face it. And I base that determination on just the countless games I've watched him play for not only for Portugal but also for Besiktas, where he's missed simple tap-ins. Even in the last friendly against Gabon, if you saw the goal that he did score, his first touch very nearly carried it away from him, and so that he missed the chance. Luckily, he was able to finish it off, but that's the kind of player that he is. And then we look at Helder Postiga, who I don't think is as skilled at getting the right positions as Almeida is, but I would say he's a slightly better finisher. And then for Eder, I think he has a little bit of both. I do think he's capable of getting in the right positions. He's physical. He can hold the ball up. He can play well either with another striker or by himself. And I think certainly as far as Paulo Bento's scheme is concerned, he will be playing up top all alone, supported by Ronaldo and either Nani or someone else if Nani's form doesn't turn around very soon. So I do think he's got some great qualities. The one thing that's really going to hold him back, in my opinion, is Paulo Bento himself. He's going to have to work him into the team a lot more and give him some opportunities to play with the starting 11. And if he doesn't, Eder's not going to be able to develop into that striker Portugal need. Conversely, if Bento does decide to work him in, I think Eder could be a difference maker. I think we saw in the Euros that Portugal don't need a striker that can score 5, 6, 7 goals in a tournament. We don't need that. We just need someone who's capable of taking the service that he's going to get from Ronaldo and Nani and Coutinho and the rest, and finishing some simple chances and holding the ball up well. And I really think he can do those things. It's just a matter of what Paulo Bento thinks and how he's going to use him.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's certainly quite an exciting thought. Portugal have had all these fantastic wingers for so long, but they've never really had a striker to take full advantage of that. If Eder really does develop and get even better, certainly does make for possibly quite an exciting future in the next few tournaments for Portugal. Okay, so we've covered now Benfica and Braga. Let's move on to some good news. As usual, FC Porto are a team that's been flying the flag highest for Portugal in Europe. Victor, they had overall, I think, very positive Champions League campaign. I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, how good are this Porto side? Do you think they can reach the heights of Jose Mourinho's side or Andre Villas-Boas' side? And secondly, for a long time in this group, it looked like they would be finishing top until about the last half hour of the final game. And of course, defeat at PSG meant they finished second. How important is that in terms of the opponents they're going to get in the next round?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm glad that they're finally receiving some recognition in Europe as a good team and not as a team that could be trampled on by the likes of Arsenal, Manchester United, those and other sides like that. But I do think that the pundits are overdoing it a bit. This team isn't as great as they're making it seem. certainly not in the same ranking as Mourinho's cup-winning team or AVB's cup-winning team. More so, I believe, it can be compared to Josualdo Ferreira's team in terms of quality. In terms of really how good they are, I mean, they've shown glimpses of class, obviously, but I don't think that they're cohesive enough yet to make a real difference. There's something missing, I think. I can't really put my finger on it. Perhaps it's defensive frailty. Certainly without Maicon, they're not as great as they are with them. Down the middle, they are weak. Through the right, they are weak in defending. So perhaps that's what's stopping them, in my mind, from being the top team that they're being described as. In terms of finishing second, it's a real blow, I think. You look at the teams that they can be matched up with compared to the teams that they had a chance of being matched up with if they had finished first, and there's a huge difference, obviously. The teams that they can be matched up with now, really, unless they get drawn with a Malaga or a Schalke, it doesn't look too bright for Porto. Teams like Borussia Dortmund, Manchester United, Barcelona, there'd be a real problem if Porto was drawn up against any of those titans. Whereas if you look at the other group of teams, other than Real Madrid, I mean, I think Porto could probably take any of them. You're looking at a weak Arsenal team, a weak Milan team, and then just run-of-the-mill second-place finishers. So it might cost them in the end, but who knows? If they can get a draw against either a Schalke or a Malaga, they might progress.
Yep. Okay. I think I'd just like to remind you, I think I'm right in saying that when Porto won the Champions League, they finished second in a Champions League group with Mourinho. Is that right? I think that's right.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, behind Real Madrid. So let's wait and see, but I think I agree with you. Definitely would have been better to finish first. Okay, we're just going to take a short break from football talk, just very briefly. I'm going to go back to Orlando, and I've noticed since running this site, and anyone who visits the site, I'll remind you again, that's PortuGOAL.net, www.portugal.net, will know that there's just a huge community of of the Portuguese diaspora all over the world that comment. My question to you, Orlando, you live in Toronto, very big Portuguese community there. Tell us a bit about about that Portuguese community and what role football plays in kind of bringing them together and reinforcing the identity of being Portuguese.
Well, I love the Portuguese community here, and in Southern Ontario we have approximately 500,000 people. So Toronto is a very multicultural city, same as New York, and there's no better place in the world to be during the World Cup than in Toronto. The flags are out en masse for every country, and after every win, streets get blocked off, parties start, raging. We're quite well known for that, and the Portuguese community is one of the biggest and most colorful here. We have many Portuguese clubs that you can go dance at, you can go watch your football games. We have tons of festas. We have an area called Portugal Village. We have another area, Little Portugal, and even Rua de Sorge. Toronto is like a home away from home, and football is definitely a key part of that. We have the Sporting Academy here in Toronto as well, and Benfica's got its own club here. So I think that all ties into the culture, and you really see it during the big tournaments.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. Yeah, like you said, perhaps a great place to watch Portugal play a World Cup game, I can imagine. Just on that note, if anyone listening to this, of course, from South Africa, from Australia, from the States, from France, from the UK, from Germany, anywhere where there's from Switzerland, these huge Portuguese communities, feel free to get in touch with us. We'd like to have you on and also talk a little bit about the Portuguese community in your area. Okay, now we're going to move on to the Europa League, which unfortunately didn't bring much joy for Portuguese clubs this year. especially if you're a Sporting fan. Nathan, Sporting just crashed and burned disastrously this Europa League. In the last few years, even when they've struggled in the league, they've normally done quite well in Europe. For instance, last season they did badly in the league, but they got to the semis of the Europa League. This season, just everything's going wrong at that club. What has to change?
Yeah, when we talk about Sporting, I think we want to ask ourselves, have they hit rock bottom? And every time we think maybe that they have, turns out that they haven't. And I think this Europa League campaign is a pretty big step closer to rock bottom, in my opinion. They were pretty dreadful. They had the worst offense and the worst defense in their group. Especially, I think defensively, they were poor. But when you're looking at their opponents, certainly was a manageable group. We can't make the argument that they just got paired up with teams that were too difficult for them. So I really think that they, like you said, they broke from form and did very poorly in Europe for the first time in a few seasons. Looking back a few years, I think Sporting, really tried to clean house a few years ago. They hired Paciencia from Braga, and it looked like they were really going to get things together and create a strong vision of winning. And they revamped the team. Pretty much bought an entire new club. And it didn't do them any good. And I think what the bottom line is that it's not going to matter how many players they buy. It doesn't matter what kind of coach they get if they can't create that vision, that clear direction, that path that's going to carry them, mentally and psychologically through the tough times. They're not going to make it. And I think for the Sporting faithful and for the management, they're going to have to accept at some point that they need to hire a coach. Who is going to be given the time. When I say time, I mean a few years to get all the players that he wants together and create that vision for them to hopefully succeed. But it's not going to happen in one season, and I think people are unwilling to accept that at this point. But such is the manner in which that they have failed as a club, in my opinion, that they're going to have to wait a few years in order to turn things around. And if they can't accept that, I think the misery is going to continue.
Yep, well, as a long-suffering Sporting fan myself, those words unfortunately ring very true. Moving on to slightly better performance. I think quite a significantly better performance, especially considering the resources available. Maritimo. Stephen, Maritimo, when the draw was made, possibly had the toughest draw of all the 6 Portuguese teams in Europe this season. But they certainly put up a good show, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did. Like you say, they had a pretty strong group, and I think they can be proud of the way they played. I don't think they were outclassed by any means in any of the games. And as you mentioned, like if you consider the sort of pedigree and the fan base of the likes of Newcastle, Bordeaux, and Bruges, then you're kind of talking a different league of European football. To put that into context, I was doing a bit of research on it, and Bruges were playing their 150th European tie against Maritimo the other night. So they got a fair amount of history there. And then you've got Newcastle and Bordeaux, both big clubs. Newcastle getting kind of 50,000 fans every week, while Maritimo, I think, are lucky if they get 5,000. So I think Maritimo have done really well to bridge the gap in resources with the opponents in their group. And I think, they obviously ended on a real high with a win against Bruges. And I think, defensively, they've been really good throughout the whole European campaign. I think they've only conceded 6 in the entire group stage. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think they lost at home. So I think their home form has been very good in that group. I think the manager deserves quite a bit of credit for it. Pedro Martins. I think he's done a good job. And you've got to say that, him and his players have got to benefit from the experience of playing in Europe and doing as well as they have done. I think for them now, the key is to kind of take the experience they've got and apply that domestically, because they've not really had the best start in the league this season. So they need to really address their league form and try and get back into Europe next year. Again, I've mentioned the defence. The defence have done really well. I think it's in attack that they've got problems. They didn't kind of score too many in Europe, and I think they're the lowest scorers in the Primera Liga. So they're definitely going to need to find goals from somewhere if they're going to kind of reach the next level, both domestically and in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, can't argue that. Of course, I think it has hurt them. In recent seasons, they've lost Kleber to Porto, who, although his performances at Porto you wouldn't know it, he was actually very good at Maritimo. They've also lost, of course, Baba, who scoring goals for fun last couple of seasons before he went to Seville, and they lost
He doesn't play much, does he, in Seville?
I don't think so. No, he's one of those players that's bit of a warning. Leave Portugal and your career is in danger. Okay, Victor, let's move on to the other Portuguese representative in the Europa League, Academica. And I think really we have to say that they also put up quite a creditable performance. How do you rate their performance overall? And from your point of view as a Porto supporter, do you think that Pedro Emanuel, who masterminded this campaign, he also took them to that historic Portuguese Cup win last season? Very good start to his career. Can you see him in the future as an FC Porto coach?
Well, speaking in terms of Braga's performance, they did really well, of course, better than a lot of us had thought they would, especially being drawn against Atletico in the group. Like Maritimo, they did not lose at home. They beat Atletico in a very memorable performance, and they drew against Victoria Pilsen and against Tel Aviv. So that's very honorable in my opinion, especially for such a small side who's getting almost no supporters coming to watch their matches. The definition of minnows, really. They really only did poorly away from home, but even then, perhaps the only result that was really truly not so great was the loss to Victoria Pilsen, which was in the initial game, I believe. That kind of lowered everyone's expectations a bit, but it's again still honorable in total. In terms of Pedro Emanuel being groomed as a possible Porto coach, I can't see it really, to be honest with you. I see him taking more the Jorge Costa route, having to, if he wants to get to Porto in the future, having to go through all these different teams and perhaps losing his way a bit. I don't even remember where Jorge Costa is now. The last time I checked, he was in Cluj, but I know he got fired a few seasons ago. Remember, he is employed now, but can't seem to remember where. That just shows you how far he's fallen off. If we're looking at other managers that have been associated with Porto in the past, I would prefer to see someone like a Domingos come in and take control if Vitor Pereira is ever either fired, or which isn't likely, obviously, or if he decides to go to a bigger club. But yeah, Pedro Emanuel doesn't seem likely, but it could happen. Being great friends with Pinto da Costa obviously helps matters.
Yeah, too right. Being great friends with Pinto Costa opens lots of doors for sure. Okay, just to round up today's show then, the inaugural show, we've been talking all about the Portuguese clubs in Europe, and of course this season hasn't been the best of seasons. But Vasco, I've got a question for you. In the last decade, Portuguese clubs, if we have a look at their record, Porto have won the Champions League, the UEFA Cup and the Europa League. Sporting and Braga have got to the final of the Europa League. Benfica have got to the semis of the Europa League, and Sporting again, and Benfica have twice got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So, that's a pretty impressive record, really, for a club of Portugal's size and population. This season, it's all gone a bit wrong. My question for you: have Portuguese clubs been overachieving these last 10 years, and should we kind of have to start having to get used to this kind of performance, or was this season just a one-off, and will it be you know, back to some glory days from next season onwards?
I think that Portuguese clubs have, in fact, been punching above their weight, clearly. If you look at Belgium or the Netherlands or Switzerland, countries that have approximately the same population as Portugal, you can see the stark difference in the club's performance. I think this downward spiral usually happens when Portugal has 6 teams in the European competition, because you have teams like Maritimo or Guimarães or Academica playing, and they usually get eliminated in the first couple of rounds. To be honest, I think that the huge disappointments have been Braga, because they were so consistent, both with Domingues and Leonardo Jardim, and Sporting, to be honest. Benfica managed to get into the Europa League, even though I think they were more than able to get through a later stage in the Champions League. I think this was a one-off season, although I think we would have to talk about this again in April or May, because I really think Benfica will have something important to say in the Europa League. I agree with Victor. I don't think Porto will manage to get through. I don't think their squad is deep enough, but I really think Benfica will be up there in come March, April, and May. I think next season Portuguese clubs will be just as strong, and I think this was just a less than good season.
Okay, well, on that optimistic note, I think that's a good place to end our inaugural show. Thank you for watching and for listening. Please let us know exactly what you think about the show using the comment section at the bottom of the page, and tune in for our next one.
Para Nani, Nani vai embora, vai fugir Nani, procurou os olhos do adversário, parou, Nani, vê que tem Almeida, vê que tem João Pereira, fugiu João Pereira, vai cruzar,